I never imagined my life would take such a dramatic turn when I accepted that interior design project. As a professional designer, I was used to entering my clients' lives, but always maintaining a professional distance. However, this time was different, very different. It all started with a routine call. A wealthy couple was looking to renovate their luxurious mansion on the outskirts of the city. Nothing out of the ordinary for someone in my position. We agreed on an initial meeting at their house to discuss the project details. I arrived punctually at the given address. The mansion was impressive, with a classic style that screamed elegance from every corner. I rang the doorbell and waited, adjusting my portfolio and making sure my appearance was impeccable. The door opened and there she was. Emily, with her chestnut hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders and green eyes. That seemed to pierce right through me. She took my breath away for a moment. She wore an elegant dress that fit her figure perfectly, revealing a natural sophistication that went beyond clothing. "Welcome," she said with a warm smile. "You must be the designer. Please come in." I entered, trying to maintain my professional composure despite the immediate attraction I felt. I introduced myself formally, and she guided me to the main living room where her husband, Jack, was waiting for us. Jack was a successful businessman with an air of confidence that filled the room. We greeted each other with a firm handshake and began discussing the project details. As we talked, I couldn't help but notice how Emily actively participated in the conversation, showing a knowledge and enthusiasm for design that pleasantly surprised me. Her eyes sparkled when she talked about colours and textures, and more than once our gazes met, sending an electric current down my spine. As the meeting progressed, I realised that Emily and I shared a similar vision for the project. She suggested ideas that perfectly complemented mine, and soon we found ourselves immersed in an animated discussion about renovation possibilities. At one point, Emily leaned in to show me a fabric sample she had in mind for the curtains. Her perfume, subtle but intoxicating, invaded my senses. Our fingers brushed lightly as we touched the fabric, and I felt a spark of electricity between us. She looked at me, her green eyes shining with an intensity that left me breathless. "What do you think of this texture?" she asked, her voice soft and loaded with a meaning that went beyond the simple question. "It's perfect," I replied, not sure if I was referring to the fabric or to her Jack. Apparently oblivious to the tension growing between his wife and me, continued talking about deadlines and budget. But I could barely concentrate on his words. My mind was completely captivated by Emily. At the end of the meeting, we agreed that I would start working on preliminary designs and return in a week to present them. As I was saying goodbye, Emily accompanied me to the door. "It's been a pleasure meeting you," she said, extending her hand. "I'm excited to see what you'll create for us." I took her hand, feeling the softness of her skin against mine. "The pleasure has been all mine," I replied, aware that our handshake was lasting longer than strictly necessary. I left the mansion with my head spinning. I knew this project would be different from any other I had done before. What I didn't know was how much it would change my life. I spent the following days immersed in work, creating designs and selecting samples. But no matter how hard I tried to focus on the technical aspects of the project, my mind constantly returned to Emily. Her smile, the sparkle in her eyes, the way her dress hugged her curves. I tried to shake off these thoughts, reminding myself that she was a married woman and I was a professional. When the day came to present my preliminary designs, I found myself as nervous as a teenager. Before his first date, I dressed with special care, choosing a suit that I knew flattered me. I told myself it was just professionalism, that I wanted to make a good impression on my clients. But deep down, I knew it was for her. Upon arriving at the mansion, it was Emily who greeted me again. This time she wore a red dress that accentuated her fair skin and dark hair. I was left speechless for a moment. "Come in," she said with a smile that seemed to hold a secret. "We're eager to see your ideas." I followed her into the house, aware of every movement of her body as she walked in front of me. Jack was waiting for us in the study, and soon we were immersed in the presentation of my designs. As I explained my ideas, I noticed how Emily's gaze lit up with each detail. She asked insightful questions, showing a genuine interest and knowledge of the subject. Jack, for his part, seemed more concerned with the practical and financial aspects. At one point, while we were discussing options for the master bedroom, Emily came closer to me to get a better look at one of the sketches. Her arm brushed against mine, and I felt an electric current run through my entire body. Our gazes met for an instant, and I saw in her eyes a desire that mirrored my own. "These designs are wonderful," Emily said, her voice soft and full of emotion. "You've really captured the essence of what we wanted." "Thank you," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I'm glad you like them." Jack nodded, apparently satisfied. "Well, it seems we're on the right track. When could you start with the implementation?" We discussed the practical details and agreed on a schedule. Throughout the conversation, I was aware of Emily's presence, of the way she moved around the room, of how her gaze met mine more times than necessary. When the meeting ended, Jack excused himself, saying he had an important business call to attend to. Emily offered to walk me to the door. In the hallway, away from Jack's gaze, Emily came closer to me than strictly necessary. "I'm really excited about this project," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I think we're going to create something beautiful together." Her choice of words, that together, made my heart race. "I think so too," I replied, aware of the tension growing between us. For a moment, we stood there, looking at each other, on the edge of something dangerous and exciting. Finally, it was Emily who broke the spell, taking a step back. "See you soon," she said, her voice loaded with unspoken promises. I left the house feeling like I had crossed a point of no return. I knew what I was feeling was wrong, that it was dangerous, but I also knew that I couldn't, and didn't want to, stop it. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The project was progressing at a good pace, and I was spending more and more time at the mansion. Jack, busy with his business, was often absent, leaving me alone with Emily. Our work meetings became increasingly personal. We discussed art, music, our dreams and aspirations. I discovered that Emily was a fascinating woman with a sharp mind and a sensitive soul. We shared similar tastes in literature and cinema and often found ourselves laughing at the same jokes. One day, while we were selecting fabrics for the new sofas, our hands brushed instead of pulling away. Emily intertwined her fingers with mine for a brief moment. I felt my heart stop. "You know," she said softly, "I've never met anyone who understands me as well as you do." I looked into her eyes, aware that we were on the edge of a precipice. "I feel the same way," I replied honestly. At that moment, we heard the front door open. Jack had arrived. We quickly separated, returning to our professional roles. But something had irrevocably changed between us. As the project progressed, Emily began to dress more provocatively during our meetings. Her dresses were tighter, her necklines more pronounced. I tried to maintain my professionalism, but it became increasingly difficult to concentrate on work when she was near one afternoon. While we were reviewing the plans for the new living room, Emily leaned over the table, her body pressed against mine. I could feel the heat of her skin, smell her perfume. My hands trembled as I pointed out details on the plan. "Are you okay?" she asked with a playful smile. "You seem a bit distracted." "I'm fine," I lied, aware that she knew exactly the effect she had on me. That night, as I drove back home, I realized I was losing control of the situation. I knew that what was happening between Emily and me was dangerous, that it could destroy lives, but I also knew that I couldn't stop it. I didn't want to stop it. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The project progressed, transforming the mansion into an even more beautiful space. But the real transformation was happening. Inside me, I found myself constantly thinking about Emily, longing for our encounters, looking for excuses to spend more time with her. One night, I received a text message from Emily. Jack is out of town on business. Could you come over tomorrow? There are some details I'd like to discuss with you. I knew I should say no. I knew that going to the mansion while Jack was away was crossing a line, but I found myself responding, "Of course, I'll be there at 7. That night I could barely sleep. My mind was filled with images of Emily, of possibilities, of repressed desires. When morning came, I dressed carefully, choosing a cologne that I knew she liked. I arrived at the mansion punctually at 7. Emily greeted me at the door, dressed in an elegant black dress that left little to the imagination. Her hair was loose, falling in soft waves over her shoulders. She looked stunning. "Welcome," she said with a smile that made my heart race. "Please come in." I followed her into the house, aware of every movement of her body. The air seemed charged with electricity. "I've prepared a special dinner," she said, guiding me to the dining room. "I hope you don't mind." The table was set for 2, with lit candles and a bottle of red wine decanting. It was a scene straight out of a romantic movie. "This is unexpected," I said, struggling to maintain my composure. Emily came closer to me, her body inches from mine. "Does it bother you?" she asked softly. "No," I replied. "Honestly, it doesn't bother me at all." Dinner was a surreal experience. The food was exquisite, the wine perfect, but I could barely concentrate on what I was eating. All my attention was on Emily. On the way her lips curved when she smiled, on how her eyes sparkled in the candlelight, on the movement of her throat as she swallowed. Our conversation flowed easily, as always. We talked about art, music, our dreams and aspirations, but there was a subtext to every word, an unexpressed desire in every look. When we finished eating, Emily suggested we review the plans for the new room we were renovating. She guided me through the space, the soft lighting creating shadows and lights that enhanced her beauty. "You know," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "since we started this project, my life has changed. You have changed my life." I turned to her, aware that we were on the edge of a precipice. "Emily," I began, but she put a finger on my lips, silencing me. "Don't say anything," she murmured. "Just feel." And then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, her lips were on mine. The kiss was soft at first, almost shy, but it quickly turned into something deeper, more passionate. Years of repressed desire, of accumulated tension, exploded in that moment. My hands found her waist, pulling her towards me, hers tangled in my hair, bringing me closer. The world around us disappeared. Only we existed, our bodies, our desire. We separated, panting, our foreheads united. My heart was beating hard in my chest, and I could feel hers echoing mine. "This is wrong," I whispered, although every fibre of my being screamed otherwise. Emily looked at me, her green eyes shining with a mixture of desire and determination. "Maybe," she said, "but it feels so right." And she was right. Despite all the reasons why we shouldn't be doing this, it felt incredibly right, as if my whole life had been a prelude to this moment. We kissed again, this time with more urgency. My hands roamed her body, memorizing every curve, every contour. Hers worked on the buttons of my shirt, her fingers leaving a trail of fire on my skin. I don't know how we got to the bedroom. Everything was a blur of passion and desire. Clothes fell to the floor, forgotten. And then we were in bed, our bodies intertwined, moving together in a dance as old as time itself. Making love to Emily was a transcendental experience. Every touch, every caress, every sigh seemed loaded with meaning. It wasn't just lust or physical desire, it was a deeper, more meaningful connection. Afterwards, we lay together in the darkness, our bodies intertwined, our breathing synchronized. We didn't speak. There was no need. At that moment, words seemed inadequate to express what we were feeling. Finally, it was Emily who broke the silence. "What are we going to do now?" she asked softly. It was the million-dollar question. What were we going to do? We had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. We had betrayed Jack. We had broken marriage vows, and yet I couldn't regret what we had done. I don't know, I replied honestly, but I know I can't give you up. Emily cuddled closer to me, her head resting on my chest. Neither can I, she whispered. I need you in my life. That night marked the beginning of our affair. In the days and weeks that followed, we found every possible opportunity to be together. Our work meetings became excuses to steal kisses and caresses. Every visit to a furniture store or a decoration boutique transformed into a clandestine adventure. The renovation project progressed, and with it, our relationship deepened. It was no longer just passion and physical desire. We were falling in love, falling into a well we didn't want to get out of, but with the intensification of our relationship, the danger of being discovered. Also grew Jack, although often absent due to his work, was not stupid. He began to notice subtle changes in Emily's behavior. The way she lit up when I arrived, how her laughter sounded more cheerful when we were together. One day, while we were working in the study, Jack entered unexpectedly. Emily and I jumped, quickly separating. We weren't doing anything compromising, but guilt made us act suspiciously. Am I interrupting something? Jack asked, his voice loaded with barely disguised suspicion. No, of course not, Emily replied quickly, perhaps too quickly. We were just reviewing the plans for the new bathroom. Jack looked at both of us, his eyes narrowed. I could see the wheels turning in his head, connecting dots that until now had remained separate. Sure, he finally said. Well, don't let me interrupt you. He left the room, but the damage was done. The air had filled with a palpable tension. Emily and I looked at each other, fear reflected in our eyes. We have to be more careful, I whispered. Emily nodded, her face pale. This is dangerous, she said, but I can't let you go. Neither can I replied, taking her hand. From that day on, our encounters became even more clandestine. We used codes in our messages, met in unexpected places. The adrenaline of the secret added a new dimension to our relationship, making it even more intense. But living a double life began to take its toll. I found myself constantly lying, inventing excuses for my absences, living with the constant fear of being discovered. I saw the same stress in Emily, dark circles under her eyes, a tension in her smile that wasn't there before. One night, as we lay together in a hotel room, Emily broke down crying. I held her, feeling her tears wet my chest. I can't go on like this, she sobbed. I love you, but this is destroying us. Her words hit me like a punch in the stomach because she was right. What we had was beautiful, but it was also poisoned by guilt and fear. What do you want to do? I asked. Though I feared the answer, Emily raised her head, her eyes red from crying but full of determination. I want to be with you, she said. Really with you. No secrets, no lies. Are you saying? I'm going to leave Jack, she said. I'm going to ask for a divorce. The world seemed to stop for a moment. Was this really possible? Could we have a happy ending after all we had done? Are you sure? I asked. It's a big step. Emily nodded. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, she said. I love you. I want a life with you, a real life, not these stolen moments. I kissed her, feeling a mixture of joy and fear. I knew the road ahead would be difficult. There would be pain, there would be anger. But for the first time since our relationship began, I felt hope. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. Emily prepared to have the conversation with Jack. I kept my distance, respecting her need to handle this on her own. Finally, the day arrived. Emily sent me a message. I'll do it tonight. Wish me luck. I spent the night awake, looking at my phone, waiting for news. I imagined how the conversation would be. I imagined how the conversation would be going, how Jack would react. Would he get furious? Would he cry? Would he suspect me? Near dawn, my phone rang. It was Emily. It's done, she said, her voice tired but firm. I told him. How did he take it? I asked, holding my breath. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Not well," she finally said. He's very hurt and angry. He suspects there's someone else, although I didn't tell him who you are." My heart sank, although I knew it was inevitable. The idea of having caused so much pain weighed on me. "What happens now?" I asked. "I don't know," Emily replied. "I need some time to sort things out, to process all of this." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "I understand," I said. "Take the time you need. I'll be here when you need me." The following days were agony. I couldn't see Emily, couldn't talk to her more than through brief text messages. The renovation project was put on hold, and I found myself with nothing to do but wait and worry. A week after Emily's conversation with Jack, I received a call. It was him. "We need to talk," he said, his voice cold as ice. "Come to the house now." I knew this moment would eventually come. I took a deep breath, gathering all my courage, and headed to the mansion. When I arrived, Jack was waiting for me in the study. Emily was there too, her face pale and tense. "Sit down," Jack ordered. I sat, feeling as if I were facing a firing squad. "I know what you've been doing," Jack said, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "With my wife, in my house." There was no point in denying it. "I'm sorry," I said, though I knew the words were inadequate. Jack laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "You're sorry? Is that all you have to say?" "Jack, please," Emily intervened. "It's not just his fault. Shut up," Jack shouted. He turned to me, his eyes burning with fury. "I trusted you. I invited you into my home, and this is how you repay me?" There was nothing I could say to justify my actions, so I remained silent, accepting his anger. "I want you to leave," Jack finally said. "Now, and never come back." I stood up, my legs shaking. I looked at Emily, seeking I don't know what comfort, confirmation. She returned my gaze, her eyes full of tears. "I'm sorry," I said again, this time addressing both of them. And then I left the room, the house, their lives. The following weeks were a blur of pain and regret. I had no news from Emily. The renovation project, obviously, was over. I found myself without work, without the love I thought I had found, with nothing but the guilt of my actions. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I received a message from Emily. "Can we meet?" We met at a small cafe in the city centre. Emily looked tired, but there was a calmness about her that I hadn't seen before. "How are you?" I asked. She smiled weakly. "Surviving," she said. "It's been difficult." I nodded, not knowing what else to say. "I've been thinking a lot," Emily continued. "About us, about what we did." My heart raced. Was this the moment when she would tell me it was all over? "What we did was wrong," she said. "We hurt Jack in a way we can never fully repair, and that's something we'll have to live with." "I know," I said softly. "But," she continued, "I also know that what I feel for you is real, and I can't ignore it." I looked at her, barely daring to hope. "I want to try." She said, "Us, a real relationship, no lies, no deception, just the two of us starting over." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. "Are you sure?" I asked. Emily nodded. "It won't be easy," she said. "We'll have to deal with the consequences of our actions. There will be people who will judge us, who won't understand, but I think it's worth trying." I took her, hand across the table. "I think so too," I said. And so, in that small cafe, we began a new chapter of our story. It wasn't the perfect beginning you see in romantic movies. It was stained by our past mistakes, by the pain we had caused, but it was ours. The following months were challenging. We had to rebuild our lives, face the judgment of friends and family, learn to trust each other in a way we had never had to before. But through all of that, our love grew, it deepened, it strengthened. It was no longer the burning fire of forbidden passion, but something more enduring, more real. A year after that day in the cafe, as we walked through the park where we used to meet in secret, I stopped and knelt in front of Emily. "I love you," I told her, pulling a ring from my pocket. with all our flaws, with all our past, will you marry me? Emily, with tears in her eyes, nodded yes. She said, yes, I'll marry you. As I hugged her, I thought about the long and complicated road that had led us to this moment. It hadn't been easy, had made mistakes, we had caused pain. But we had also learned, we had grown, and in the end, we had found something beautiful and true. Our story wasn't perfect. It was full of unexpected turns, moments of doubt and regret. But it was our story. And as I held Emily in my arms, I knew I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. Because in the end, love, true love, doesn't always come the way we expect. Sometimes it comes in the most unexpected moments, in the most complicated ways. But when it does, when it's real, it's worth fighting for. It's worth facing any obstacle, overcoming any challenge. And as Emily and I walked away from the park, hand in hand, ring on her finger, I knew we had found that kind of love. A love that had survived the storm, that had strengthened through trials and errors. A love that, despite its imperfect beginnings, promised a bright future. The following months were a whirlwind of wedding preparations. We decided to have an intimate ceremony just with our closest friends and family members who had come to accept our relationship. It wasn't easy. There were those who judged us, who couldn't forgive the way our story had begun. But there were also those who saw beyond our mistakes, who recognized the sincerity of our love. The wedding day arrived, a sunny Saturday in spring. As I waited at the altar, my heart was beating with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. And then I saw her Emily, walking towards me in a white dress that flowed like water, her face radiant with happiness. At that moment, everything else disappeared. It was just her and me and the future that awaited us. We exchanged vows, promises of love and fidelity that had a special meaning for us. We had learned the hard way, the value of honesty and loyalty. Our promises were not empty words, but deep commitments born from our shared experiences. After the ceremony, during the reception, Emily and I snuck away for a moment. We found a quiet corner in the garden, away from the bustle of the party. "Are you happy?" I asked her, holding her hands in mine. Emily looked at me, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied. "And you?" "I'm the happiest man in the world," I said, pulling her close for a kiss. As we kissed, I felt a sense of fulfillment that I had never experienced before. We had been through so much, we had overcome so many obstacles, and here we were, on the other side, stronger and more united than ever. The years passed, and our life together unfolded in ways we never would have imagined. We opened our own interior design business, combining my technical expertise with Emily's artistic eye. Working together every day allowed us to strengthen our relationship even further, learning to communicate better, to resolve conflicts constructively, to support each other in our dreams and ambitions. Not everything was easy, of course. There were moments of doubt, moments when the ghosts of our past threatened to overshadow our present. Sometimes, in the middle of an argument, one of us would mention Jack, and the pain of what we had done would resurface, but we learned to face those moments together, to talk openly about our feelings, to forgive ourselves and each other over and over again. And with each obstacle we overcame, our love grew stronger, deeper, more resilient. 5 years after our wedding, Emily gave me the most wonderful news. We were expecting a baby. The idea of becoming parents filled us with a mixture of excitement and fear. Would we be able to raise a child with the emotional baggage we carried? But when our daughter, Lily, was born, all those fears vanished. Holding her in my arms for the first time, seeing the look of absolute love in Emily's eyes, made me realize that we had been blessed with a second chance in life, an opportunity to create something beautiful and pure, to give the kind of unconditional love that we ourselves had longed for. Raising Lily became our greatest adventure. Every milestone, every smile, every tear brought us closer together. And as she grew, we found ourselves telling her our story. Not all the details, of course, but enough for her to understand that love sometimes comes in unexpected ways, that people can make mistakes but can also learn from them and grow. One day, when Lily was 10 years old, she asked us, "Do you regret how your story began?" Emily and I looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between us. Finally, it was Emily who answered. "We regret the pain we caused," she said softly, "but we don't regret finding each other, fighting for our love, because without that, we wouldn't have you, sweetheart." Lily nodded, processing our words with a wisdom beyond her years. "I think I understand," she said. "Sometimes bad things can lead to good things, right?" "Exactly," I said, hugging her, "and you're the best thing that's ever happened to us." That night, after putting Lily to bed, Emily and I sat on the back porch, looking at the stars. I took her hand, feeling the familiar comfort of her skin against mine. "Do you ever imagine what our life would have been like if things had been different?" Emily asked quietly. I thought for a moment. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But then I look at our life now, at you, at Lily, at everything we've built together, and I know I wouldn't change anything." Emily rested her head on my shoulder. "Neither would I," she whispered. We stayed like that for a long time, in comfortable silence, reflecting on our journey. We had started as clandestine lovers, trapped in a web of lies and deception. But through honesty, forgiveness, and unwavering love, we had transformed ourselves. We were no longer those lost and confused people. We were partners, lovers, parents, best friends. Our story wasn't conventional. It wasn't the kind of fairy tale you tell children, but it was real, it was ours, and every twist and turn had led us exactly where we were meant to be. As I looked at Emily, her profile illuminated by the soft moonlight, I felt a wave of gratitude so intense it almost took my breath away. For her love, for her forgiveness, for the life we had created together. "I love you," I told her, the words simple but loaded with everything we had been through together. Emily turned to me, her eyes shining with the same love I had first seen so many years ago in that luxurious mansion. "And I love you," she replied. And at that moment, under the stars with the soft sound of our daughter's breathing sleeping inside the house, I knew we had found our happy ending. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't without scars, but it was beautiful in its imperfection, because in the end, isn't that what true love is all about? Not about unattainable perfection, but about finding beauty in imperfections, growing together through challenges, forgiving and being forgiven. Our story had begun with a betrayal, but it had blossomed into something beautiful and lasting. And as I held Emily in my arms, I knew that our love, tested by fire and strengthened by trials, would last a lifetime.